All right. Thank you all for joining us for this, our closing fireside chat of our second FC Build conference. Since only 5 of you in the audience are now new to FC Build, let me start by introducing Foundation Capital very briefly. So we were founded in 1995. We're an early stage venture fund managing $4 billion in capital, and more than 30 of our companies have gone public over the last 2.5 decades. We've backed some extraordinary entrepreneurs, and in our enterprise practice, we've been fortunate to partner with founders in enterprise infrastructure up and down the stack. So from cloud, data, AI, automation, and DevOps, as well as B2B SaaS and cybersecurity. We primarily lead seeds and Series A's, usually before a company has any revenue or in some cases even a product. Basically, we invest in extraordinary dreamers with extraordinary dreams and work with them to make it real. And with that, speaking of extraordinary dreamers and builders, please allow me to introduce you to our speaker, Anatoly Yakovenko. By way of background, Toly is co-founder and CEO of Solana, which, as the title of our fireside chat suggests, is the fastest blockchain in the world. Toly created Solana in 2017, following more than a few sleepless nights pondering how his work as a kernel developer for highly constrained cellular networks could be applied to highly constrained blockchain networks. Prior to Solana, Toly led the development of operating systems at Qualcomm, distributed systems at Mesosphere, and then compression algorithms at Dropbox. In my opinion, at its core, Toly is an engineer's engineer who's obsessed with building crazy cool shit that pushes the perimeter of what's technically feasible and solves real problems for real people. So with that behind us, Toly, I would love for you to just kick things off with the Solana origin story. How did a former wireless engineer and mobile operating systems architect come up with this concept for the fastest blockchain on the planet?
Thank you for the intro. I'll try to live up to it. Appreciate it. So I am an engineer. Spent most of my career at Qualcomm, and 2017 was when this kind of blockchain boom happened, and there was this really wild dreams of what Bitcoin, what Ethereum could enable. Crazy ideas, right? We were gonna track salmon on on Ethereum, but none of these systems scaled, and you really saw that during just the rush of people transferring assets between exchanges during this boom market. So Bitcoin transactions went to $60-$70 per transaction for a single transfer. Yep. It was pretty clear that this stuff isn't going to work, and a lot of the folks who were publishing ideas, I'm an engineer, kind of started looking at the space more seriously when it kind of became in the forefront. Just looking at those papers, they didn't seem like to tackle the right problem or the right challenge. They all seemed to fall short. And I was literally hanging out with my friend at Cafe Soleil, and I had 2 coffees and a beer. I believe that was the mix.
And we ups and down. Here we go.
Right. We were talking about proof of work and why it's necessary and why mining and all this stuff makes consensus work. And I was up till 4 in the morning. I had this eureka moment that there's a way to encode passage of time as data. And that was really it. I didn't even know how to apply it to a blockchain. All I really kind of came up with something that I later learned was a verifiable delay function. But I couldn't Google for this thing. I was trying to Google for it, and I couldn't describe it, so couldn't find anybody working on it. And that was.
Is it somewhat ironic that this was sort of was it ironic that this was the basis for TDMA when in fact you were working on CDMA?
Yeah. So I kind of felt like if I had an intuition that if there's a way to track time, then a lot of the stuff that applied in wireless networks was going to work in crypto. And that was really what made me take this space seriously. Because once I started thinking about the problem and the challenge, what I realized is that it's a single computer that's global. And it is by definition, because it's a single computer, it's a constrained environment. It's very resource constrained. And the thing that I worked on for over a decade at Qualcomm was a very resource constrained environment. You had started with 2 megabytes of RAM and 16-bit processor that was 400 megahertz, and you had to make it do every application under the sun. bowling and from contacts and like
Yep.
the browsing experience that you remember there, that took a work of art to get this thing to download websites and display them on that tiny screen. So, so all those skills I felt were applicable to this, and it felt like an opportunity to build a platform, to build a new kind of operating system. And this is what my passion always was. I ended up, whenever any project that I worked on, I kind of ended up in that platform stack. How do I
Mm-hmm.
abstract hardware while expressing the potential that the hardware can the tools that the hardware provides to the developers? So
Yeah.
how do I find that layer of software that just makes it easy for devs to go do something magical? So that was really what made me think that I could have impact in the space, was that experience at Qualcomm. Um, and those early folks that I talked to were basically, that was the advice that they gave me, that the space is so early that folks with 10 plus years experience coming out of these big companies with like real engineering experience at scale to, you know, a billion users, that is something that was missing in crypto, and there's a credible shot to go be that team that takes it to the next level. So
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
was it.
You're making me think of, you know, the amazing firmware engineers that I've worked with in my career, the ones that really are kind of next level. Yeah, they, you know, they dream in hexadecimal, but they also sort of, to your point, sort of visualize, you know, how applications can be unlocked and things can be done that could never have been done before. So that's the origin story. Now I want to literally like zoom 4 years ahead, and just bounce through some of the amazing stuff that was surfaced and unleashed at the Breakpoint conference in Lisbon just 3 weeks ago. We were all there. We brought our whole team, and you had, goodness, I think you had 2/3 of your team there. And you know, obviously there's a lot of, you know, partnership and product announcements, but I felt like all of that kind of belies the most important thing, which was just this intense energy that just took over the town. And there was a bunch of examples that pop up to me, but I'd love kind of what stood out to you most from Breakpoint, where you're like, I could have never imagined this 4 years prior.
Um, yeah. I mean, we sold out of tickets in like a span of a day, basically. That was weird because the previous conference that we had, there's photos of it, and you can literally see one person in the seats, and that's me. You see the back of my head in those photos. I'm the one. Um, so having that place packed and feeling the energy at the engineering folks that came together, the panels, and kind of just the like what I wanted to build was this thing that unlocks something new to application developers, and seeing that come to fruition, this, you know, it doesn't feel like quickly because there's 4 years in the making, but actually achieving it just felt like amazing. It was wild. Like I really didn't expect, like, you know, the the thing that you never expect as a founder is that um, when you're grinding for like 3.5 years, that it's not going to be a linear growth, that it all of a sudden like everything clicks and it kind of grows within a span of a year to what you dreamed of. And that change is so rapid, it's just really hard to process mentally, because
Uh,
you're still in the trenches, like, okay, I need to like, you know, I need to push, I need to like code every moment that I have, and then take this meeting that's in 15 minutes. So how do I
Exactly,
yeah.
exactly. There was a moment for me, I think it was the night before the conference kicked off, and we were hosting a happy hour, and this guy shows up at the happy hour who was coming from, it was just north of Vancouver. He was in the oil and gas industry, and he introduced himself, and I'm chatting with him, and he's like, you know, I told my wife on Thursday, so whatever, 2 days prior, he's like, I just need to go to Lisbon. She's like, what do you mean? It's like, well, I can't get tickets. I don't know anyone there, and I don't have a hotel room yet. But there's just so much cool stuff happening around the Solana ecosystem that I just need to go and learn more. And I felt like that was almost sort of like the, you know, the snow globe of like of the experience of these people just showing up to learn and to share, and it was just awesome. So you were talking earlier about platforms, and that is sort of the dream here. It's also, I mean, it's so easy for folks to get caught up in the token but really, when you think about the ultimate platform technology that you've built, where you kind of create the right incentives for developers who then build apps that attract users, who then attract more developers, and that sort of virtuous cycle. But when I think about bootstrapping a new blockchain, a new layer one, you're kind of working in an ecosystem that is very highly narrative driven, right? Like there's a lot of tribalism. This ecosystem is one that's already, super hard. And I just would love to understand, how did you really intentionally think about getting the platform flywheel turning? How did you think about incentives differently? How did you kind of like do this in a way that was different than anything that happened before?
Some of it was not like choices that we made intelligently, that were almost forced on us.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we had to build through the bear market, and we never raised what our competitors raised. So we were in an environment where we raised, enough runway to what we felt was enough to get stuff done, but our competitors had raised 10x that.
Yeah.
So I always felt that we were the underdog, and it made us really hungry and made us prioritize engineering decisions in a quite different way. We really needed to get the network to launch as fast as possible with the core feature that was different from everyone else's. That this thing could be really, really fast smart contract platform. And it didn't matter that it wasn't compatible with everything else. It didn't matter that like we almost optimized for that thing. Can we make extremely fast, cheap, smart contracts? And if that is a differentiator that makes sense and like has product market fit, then we kind of basically put all our chips on that. And
and so performance was that was the thread that pulled through everything.
Yeah, the reasoning was that that was some intentional reasoning there, and it was basically that there has to be some use cases that really critically depend on lowest latency, highest throughput, cheapest thing.
Yep.
And those use cases, if they exist, they're going to go on the cheapest, fastest blockchain, because they just don't want to compromise that ever. They definitely will never make any other option. And if we just need a couple of them to get like a little bit of product market fit to survive. And that was really my thinking. How do we find somebody who cannot go anywhere else and really like, make them succeed?
Yeah.
And what I thought the product, and that was like, again, some luck there and kind of being right. I thought the interesting product was trading and markets, and literally our slide deck said blockchain and NASDAQ speed. And
I remember, I still have that
deck. what I was thinking is that because of censorship resistance, it means information is free and fair and arrives everywhere simultaneously. In theory, it could be competitive at New York Stock Exchange and CME if the network is as fast as possible, meaning that information passes through this thing at the same speed as news. And therefore, if you're trading on actual newsworthy events, you shouldn't see an arbitrage between this decentralized one and the centralized one. And that seemed like a win, because all of a sudden it disintermediated businesses that are making $10-20 billion a year. So if that's possible, then we succeeded. But what I didn't realize in retrospect was that while that's the killer use case, is that stuff that you see now with NFTs, with Web3, it sits on top of DeFi. I don't really expect that we're going to see Apple and Tesla stock moved from NASDAQ and primarily being traded on these decentralized platforms. But what I expect is that these open markets, these fair open markets that are extremely cheap and robust, are going to grow, trading stuff everywhere from NFTs of monkeys to capital ships in a space massive game, and that growth is going to outpace whatever you do in the equity side, because that growth is really now replacing how we interact in the web, right? It is replacing how web is monetized. It's no longer ad revenue based. It's based on user created content and engagement, and it's just a whole different business model for the entire digital economy. So
well, I love that example, and the one that's been top of mind of recent. We're not investors, but we're huge fans, is Audius. And when I think about, there's probably a lot of folks listening to this or watching this who are kind of like crypto native, or just very much kind of down the rabbit hole. But there's the vast, they're outnumbered by 100 to 1 by people who just like want a great experience and a better version of Spotify that's more directly connected to artists. But if I think about what they did early on, which was it's basically a decentralized Spotify, but like artists can basically post music directly, not through the labels. They can basically have real interactions with their fans. They benefit from from the network value increasing over time. And bluntly, the thing that I love about it as well, which I'm curious to get your read on, is they started on a Ethereum sidechain, if I remember right. And basically the thing kind of sucked for a while because it just was falling over. They kept Ethereum for a number of the transactions, but my understanding is the whole CMS now is over on Solana. And so to your point around like high frequency and really importance around managing latency, can you talk through like that example, and then like what are 5 others that maybe people aren't thinking about?
Yeah, so like if you're building to replace NASDAQ, you end up really focusing on latency and cost,
Yeah.
because that is their differentiator. And I did intuitively think that if we succeed there, it means whatever these people are dreaming about, crypto taking over the web and everything else, it'll just be better on Solana, because you get this like Web 2 response time, things settle in milliseconds instead of seconds, right, to tens of seconds, and that's just a better user experience. And anybody that's going to be thinking about how do I grow from 1 million to 10 million users, they're going to optimize for those things, because that's just what they do, right? That's what engineers do. They care about these things. So that was really the selling point to Audius and to like a lot of folks in those early days. When they tested our platform, they could see that like what they wanted to do for their users was just work better.
Yep.
And even if it took a little bit of work to change from Solidity to Rust, we helped them with that. And we definitely offered engineering resources in those days to everybody that would think about like how do I port over. That that effort was worthwhile for a company that was thinking, I'm going to grow my users well beyond what crypto is today, which is like a few million people. They're thinking we want to take on Spotify, and means the general public.
Yeah.
They need 30, 50 million users, right? And that's a whole different kind of vision than I'm building an app simply for what the current market is in Ethereum.
Exactly. And I think they're at 7-ish million from last I looked,
Yep.
or order of magnitude,
Yep.
and over 100,000 artists. I think it skews very much to the EDM side of things, but I'm sure we'll expand that footprint over time. So you said this briefly before, but I want to come back to it, which is, this notion of the next phase really is all about onboarding the next billion users, right? Like we've got a platform that's up and running and robust, and not that can't get better and faster and cheaper, but like we're all about sort of onboarding, the next billion. We've talked a little bit about DeFi, a little bit about Web3. Obviously, some really cool stuff happening in gaming and digital art. For the, I mean, there's so many students, engineers, grad students in our audience now who are kind of thinking, how am I going to spend the next 5 years of my life? What are some of the non-obvious opportunities that still need to be built on top of Solana that they should go turn their turrets upon?
So we're definitely hiring systems engineers. If that's what you want to do, if you want to stare at benchmarks, definitely just reach out. That is infinite amount of work there. On the application side, I think it's so early, and this is a really great time to try to innovate and think of like the way I think about it is that you're trying to just knock down that first domino, that V0 product, for whether it's music or social networking or content creation, and like finding ways where you can get that first little bit of traction with 10, 20,000 users. So you don't have to think like I'm going to take on Google today, right?
Yeah.
Like and that's the opportunity, because if you can succeed there and all of crypto grows from maybe like the 5 to 10 million people that have actually signed stuff on these chains all combined in the world, to 100 million, to then a billion, that application that you right now have the time to experiment, get product market fit and iterate, that thing is going to grow with it. And if you do a good job, this is like the best time to like start those early projects that grow into, really competing with Google and Facebook, and disintermediating them. The kinds of things that I think right now tend to have traction is if you can, like what I think is obvious is that there's a long tail of artists and creators that don't make any money on YouTube, on Spotify, that these streaming platforms basically generate a lot of revenue, but for only the top tier artists. And then the long tail of great artists with tens of
They
thousands of
make nothing.
fans,
Yeah.
they make nothing. But we saw with like NFTs, artists like Steve Aoki, awesome artist, right? Barely makes anything from streaming. Has to go like run do concerts. That's how he. That's
Yep.
how you make money as an artist at his level. That's a pretty big artist. Um, he was able to build NFTs that are awesome experiences for his fans and like make like real money that is substantial to that person, to an artist at that level. And that's a tool that we just gave that creator to go just do their thing. And every time they do that, they engage their fans. Those fans end up installing Phantom. They get those NFTs and start understanding what crypto is, what custody is. And that's the mental shift that happens slowly but surely. And we see the number of users that are actually signing things. Like in the last 6 months, like 200 days for Phantom, they went from like nobody to 1.4 million,
Oh my goodness.
which has been an insane run. So that's like, can you like basically unblock somebody from engaging their fans, making money, creating art? Like those are, I think, like really, really big opportunities right now.
So if I play this back to you, maybe to sort of, for those watching, every opportunity where there is a centralized entity that is sort of taking the vast majority of the rents, whether that's social networking or music, there is an opportunity for, instead of you giving your photos up for free and providing content and getting served up basically a ad streamer, you could actually be highly aligned with your users who are contributing this content, whether that's social networking or driving around in the backseat of an Uber or listening to music. There's an opportunity for much more alignment.
For sure.
Love
Yeah.
that. Love that. So I'm guessing that kind of mission orientation is probably pervasive in the developer community. I'd love to weave in a question Sid asked a couple of minutes ago, which is related to, you've done Breakpoint. You've had a kind of a couple of these developer conferences now. First one, as you said, was more crickets than community. But if you think about kind of like a young company following, trying to sort of emulate some of the great things that you guys have done with respect to community, what are the other things you're doing? So I'll throw out one, which is I actually felt like your community incentives from the very, very earliest days. I mean, we invested in March of 18, and there was already clear kind of what your incentives for the community were going to be. And I think I remember them being roughly 3x larger than anything else we'd seen. But what are you doing to incentivize community other than things like Breakpoint?
Yeah, so again, that was almost like a forced choice because the amount of work that it takes to set up a Solana validator is so much harder that I was like, well, just give them more. Like find the people that are willing to like do the grind of actually do the work and incentivize them. And that turned out to be extremely important to like reward those early people that are building the platform with you.
Yep.
Because they're taking time out of their day unpaid, right? They don't work for you. They're effectively unpaid folks working for you, and giving them that true sense of ownership that was substantial, like made a huge difference because now those folks are building companies, services. Half of our RPC providers actually came from those early validators.
Wow.
That build those boxes and watch the network fall over and like told us keep going, like this is cool. I believe in you. So that like, and honestly, I don't know if folks know, but I'm sure everyone has heard of this. I play underwater hockey, so that experience really reminded me of like whenever folks would move to a new city from our play underwater hockey community and they're like, how do I build a club there? It's like you just got to go out there and shake people's hands and like tell them, look, I'm doing this weird thing. does this sound interesting to
Yep.
you? I promise we'll get beers afterwards and laugh about it. So that was like just being a person connecting with people and like telling them like the vision and like getting that connection was really important. And the incentives, I think, aligned the right folks for the long term.
So in many ways, it was build a great product, give a shit, care about the community, and the fact that there were wonderful economic incentives was in many ways a bonus. And I think it's been said about you before that like you don't really care about the money here. It's about building something of import, and that brings real value, and that sort of really comes through.
If you read like Paul Graham's essays, like the true Silicon Valley entrepreneurs, the essence I think of what they're saying is like forget about like the numbers and just really optimize for this like core value proposition that you're building. And they that's the same thing, right? Like you really want to build something special and like something that was never there before and inspire people to like believe in it. And like if you do that and like you get like alignment, especially the new thing with open source software is that with tokens you can actually get substantial buy-in that like gives ownership of this thing with the people building with you.
Yeah.
If like if Linux had this in those early
Oh my
days,
goodness. Yes.
I honestly believe that you would have a decentralized open developer platform that would have taken over Microsoft, like way faster.
No
We
question.
would.
So many interesting parallels to open source and community development. This sort of notion, really, that the product exists before the company does, right? Like, and that, in some senses, is the proof. Monetization coming much later. A question that has come up and also is on, I think, probably a lot of people's minds is, there's a lot of folks, particularly kind of, the folks who've been tracking crypto closely, who want to pit Solana against other chains, right? Like they're like, it's an either or with respect to Ethereum, for example, and that we're in kind of some sort of zero sum platform war. We already talked a little bit about coexistence in products like Audius, but can you give a better sense for sort of how everyone wins in this opportunity space, as opposed to it feeling like it's a pie that just has to get sliced more thinly?
So the narrative is always like driven because people want to like they love they love the narrative. And I think in tech you do have these like tribalism and like true believers, because when you have a technology that's special, that Linux to me was that
Yeah.
special technology, you start imagining a world where everything is different than today. And that like that thing that you believe is going to happen in 10 years, it's almost like a fake,
You're already
right?
living it. It's like you're living it today, right?
Yeah, it's a religious experience. You totally bought in, right? And it becomes part of your identity. And I think that's an extremely amazing driver for like changing the world, right? And it's a really positive force. But obviously, if people start butting heads, it's BSD versus Linux. It's it's Mac versus PC or whatever, right? Like, and those narratives, I think, are just somewhat silly, because in reality, like I think what generally happens is if you have a hard technology, you have a Pareto efficient problem, and you have to make real trade-offs. And the stuff that optimizes for things that are useful, and I believe Solana is one of those. I think Ethereum is also one of those. Bitcoin is also one of those. Those things will all survive because they serve a very useful purpose that they're optimized for, and there's use cases that will just not give that up for anything. And that means that I don't know how big those use cases get, how big those markets will get. That is the unknown.
Yep.
How useful that those things are to humans, but you'll probably see like pockets of things where you really want to use Bitcoin for this thing, you really want to use Ethereum for that set of applications, and Solana for the others.
Gotcha. So for folks who are kind of wondering, hey, which chain do I build on, or how do I think about sort of what's the right fit for me? Your point around specialization matters. Kind of choose the right tool for the job, as opposed to one size fits all.
There's definitely like things where standards and like those kinds of things start kind of creating network effects.
Yep.
That are hard to overcome. So if you don't have if the spot on the Pareto curve you picked is too close to this like thing that's growing network effects,
Yes.
it'll just subsume you. But if you picked a spot that's far enough away that there's a clear gap between the two.
So can I offer some advice too? Because this wasn't asked this way, but I've seen this, and I'm guessing you've seen it 100 times over. Is there are a bunch of copycat services already being built on other chains? So for example, there'll be a lending platform on Solana, or a handful of them now, and someone else, and this is advice, this isn't to you, Rahul, who asked the question, but like I've seen this broadly with entrepreneurs who are like, hey, we saw that cool thing working over on Solana, but because it's too crowded over there's already 3 or 4 of them. Let's go build the copycat version of that over on whatever, on Algorand. And I think that is unwise, because ultimately I think, when these products and applications become pervasive, and that's like what we're all driving towards, in some senses, what it's built upon just doesn't matter, right? So you really are trying to use the best tool best platform underlying your application.
Totally. It's found like in those early days when you're struggling for funding and like trying to survive, that may be a decision that a founder makes out of like necessity. But like you need to, it's a short-term win if it succeeds. You really need to have vision well beyond that. That is, why is this lending protocol going to take over the world and run on whatever chain it needs to run to serve its users? If you can like really think about it that way, then that's where you should start from, and then like do what you got to do, right, to get there.
So true, so true. You've lived those many white knuckle moments. So last week, or maybe it was the week before, time is all smushed. Jack announced sort of Square's rename. I wasn't sure if it was just he was feeling jealous of Facebook turning into Meta, but or adding a third dimension. I guess a square can become a block. But I'm curious, sort of when you see Stripe, Square, a bunch of these really interesting, very intense, well-run fintech companies beginning to kind of push into the sector, maybe express some of their crypto ambitions. I mean, in general, my sense is this is a good thing, but how do you think about that as one of the insurgents in this new category?
I think what's interesting is that both of these companies are founder driven. It wasn't the board of directors that made that decision, and it was Jack and Zuck and Mark. And I think it kind of shows that it takes like that one person to make this really big, crazy bet. And I think they're right. I think they're the ones that are likely going to fail like 50 times and then figure out how does crypto transform their business. And the first ones to do it with their scale and scope, I think, have a huge opportunity to really outpace like all the traditional companies that they're competing with that haven't made that switch. So I'm excited. I don't think this is so much like Microsoft shipping Internet Explorer and then forcing Internet Explorer as the only solution. I think we're kind of past the ability of any single company to do that. Even Facebook, I don't think has that kind of stranglehold on how we interact with the web and digital content. I think it is so big now that even if 3 billion people have a Facebook account, not all of them spend all their time on Facebook.
No question. In fact, in so many ways, when we see the number of broken plays of their crypto attempts, I think what that only does is it suggests, hey, this is hard and it's really big, because we wouldn't keep doing it and failing so publicly if it weren't so important.
but what's important is that they're trying, and that is takes guts, right? And I honestly think it's because it's the CEOs, the founders that decided we need to change the company and how we're doing and really transform everything towards this new business model.
Yep. So there's a bunch of personal questions, not too personal, but good personal questions coming. But I want to ask, Kirsten mentions, and I think I remember what she's referring to, that you said in an interview at one point that you were the biggest skeptic of crypto. Can you elaborate on why this is?
It's so early. Like the use cases and business models are really unproven. I think we're just starting to see some inklings of these things where there's a clear reason why this stuff needs to exist. Um, because you do have like, if you're thinking about finance and trading, well, there's an alternative, right? You can already do these things at banks, at NASDAQ or whatever. Why didn't somebody just build a cheaper version of that? Like go go build a bank with an API and just charge people less fees. Like is that is that the same thing as crypto? And what that's missing is I think this revolutionary idea that once you have enough like users that understand what cryptography is and they can sign things and have a mental model for that, that is a totally different shift from being competing on feature set with banking
Right.
to having a global giant computer that anybody can code with and iterate and build that does finance but everything else as well. And that's like as big of an idea as like the personal computer or the
Yep.
web. It's just hard. It's hard to describe it, right? But like that none of this is proven, so you have to be extremely skeptical when somebody tells you, okay, we're gonna like track salmon on the blockchain and it's gonna add value. Like, is it like why? Like, where
Well, it's
does
so
it?
funny you say that. We had a filter in our practice when we were kind of doing our earliest crypto investments, even prior to our investment in you all, was it wasn't enough that you could put it on the blockchain. It was that, and this was one of our kind of foundational criteria for whether it was interesting to us, was the blockchain was actually the best way to do it, right? Like it wasn't just that you could do it there. And the comments we were making earlier about alignment and incentives and inclusion, that's the kind of stuff that couldn't have been done prior, right? Like so,
Yep.
when we see that magic happening, that's where I think we get really excited and really start to lean in. All right, so you were talking about some of the reasons to be skeptical. I'd love to maybe flip it for a minute and just thinking about how quickly you guys have gone from idea to thriving community. Just this incredible momentum in just 4 years, and yet at the same time, as you say, we're just getting started. It's still so unproven. I'm curious, when you kind of like do that, 2 beers and 2 coffees dreaming today. What are the things that get you most excited about the next 4 years? How big could this be, and what's getting you going?
Yeah, and the only parallel that I have is being like growing up on the internet in those early days, maybe 5 million people on the internet that you're interacting with through bulletin boards, and just how quickly change year to year to all of a sudden 500 million people. And it's just, I would not have believed you that, sharing pictures with your family and cats is going to be worth, $1 trillion or whatever Meta is worth today. Like 25 years later, it just did not make sense, right? That idea just didn't make sense. So when I look at crypto today, I'm extremely skeptical that people that promise like the pets.com at the time, right, we're going to deliver pet food to everybody globally. It seems like a theoretically possible thing to do, right? But in the 90s, it also seemed infeasible. Like
Yeah.
the tech wasn't there, none of the stuff worked as well, and the number of users using it was just not big enough. So what I'm excited about is like in the next 4 years, that hockey stick growth that we saw on the internet where it was slow, but then all of a sudden it
Yep.
went from like, small numbers, single, maybe double digit millions to, 300 million people all using crypto. And why? Like, what is that use case that hits those viral effects that gets there? Um, so that
Amazing.
that part of it is like the exciting part, like Friendster was, I think, or in 6 degrees were the first true crypto, like internet native applications
Yep.
on the internet that had no connection to the physical world. And that happened around that shift between like 100 to 300 million people on the internet.
And knowing that like there are all these cool things that are yet to be invented that are also
Yep.
going to take advantage of something that hasn't existed before, and that like they're going to be built on this platform, and in many ways could be even more valuable than the platform itself, right? Like, which is which is super exciting days, right?
That's the goal, right? I believe and honestly want whatever applications run on Solana, I want it to be worth more than Solana. That is like the win. It means we succeeded. We build an awesome platform that just changes the lets devs change the world.
Yep. Well, you made allusion to it, and I want to actually weave Sang's question in. You talked about growing up, early days of web, but growing up, you and your parents are from the former Soviet Union. What do they think about what their son is doing now?
It's wild for them, they're we were immigrants, and coming from the Soviet Union, you literally could only take $50 per person when you left. That was it. So my mom tells me that they came into this country, 7 of us, $350, and she's extremely proud, right? Of myself and my family, and everyone that succeeded here. It's awesome. I guess the story is that for whatever reason, myself and my dad and my grandfather, we all worked in communications systems.
The outside world, we have to get out.
my grandfather literally worked on the end generals problem in World War II. They ran wires between active fronts, so that was the literal end generals problem, right? And so it's pretty wild. Yeah, for sure.
Talk about the beginning of business, the beginning of distributed systems, right?
Yeah.
Truly amazing. So Rodolfo asks, and this is a great one, particularly for our audience of early stage entrepreneurs, is what are your tips for when a TradFi or existing SaaS company is trying to figure out what to do with crypto? How can they not just do the old kind of .com, slap the kebab shop onto the French restaurant kind of concept, but really take it seriously and integrate it into what they're building?
So that's a tough thing that we face with companies that are traditional companies that have revenues. Is they're all excited about crypto, but then what do we do? And they have to realize that the true crypto native market is still that 5 million people. So how do they enable features that onboard their users to crypto and teach them custody, understand them? This is a really tough decision, product decision. It really is product. I think the easy things are USDC settlement. You can actually start accepting USDC, and you may see, well, out of my 10, 20, 50 million users that I have in my traditional company, maybe 5% of them start using this rail, and that's the user base you've now identified. And then go talk to them, start building products for them. What else would they want to see? I think right now is the time to start iterating and discovering. And there is no you got to understand that it's going to be a grind. There is no magic product. If there was, I'd be building it. We would be building it right now and trying to get grow it on Solana as fast as we could.
So true. Rodolfo and I were actually on a board call just before this, in one of our portfolio companies. For us all is building retirement savings product. Think of it as sort of 401k for the rest of us, for meaning for folks who don't have sort of the benefit of a traditional retirement savings plans. And the response around our crypto offering, which is only meant to be a tiny bit of your savings, it's 2, 3, 4, 5% is all we're thinking. And the level of interest around that, to your point, just to kind of dip your toe in the water and then sort of see what takes, has been just absolutely remarkable for us. The level of anticipated interest. It's really interesting to hear that. So maybe my last question, integrating a couple thoughts from the comments. It's got to have been a crazy last 4 years with some pretty unforgettable oh shit moments that things could have gone really, really bad. I'm curious, sort of, what are the 1 or 2 that stand out to you, and that when you're advising founders, whether in crypto or enterprise or consumer or financial technologies, what are the kind of 1 or 2 things that have left their indelible impression on you, and what were the lessons learned?
I mean, the launch was a big oh shit moment for sure. So We launched March 16th, 2020. People remember March 12th was the day that Bitcoin and S&P 500 crashed by like 70%, or whatever it was. But it was like our investors were calling us, telling us that like, you guys have enough cash to survive. Like reduce
Yep.
spend, like hunker down. Nobody knows what's going to happen next. And a lot of them felt very worried about us launching at that time, because launching meant going to market, having your token listed, and everything else. And that's a financial decision that's really, really major. And in we kind of like war room this a bit, and basically my thinking was that the worst time to launch is right before a crash like this, because you basically see everything plummet and expectations just like evaporate, right? Like
Yeah.
people lose money, right? And that's like a really, really, like, you kind of destroy that community. But right after seemed like, while we weren't going to get, you know, it's obvious to me that like, okay, we were probably going to get a really low price. Is that bad? Like, and actually like my thinking was, maybe that's a good thing, because the people that start engaging us, getting into the community now,
They
get
will
in
be
early,
loyal.
and they're true believers, right? Like obviously things are not on fire, right? The world isn't going to stop spinning, and like things will recover. So um to like, it seemed like the right choice in retrospect, because that's effectively what happened. We two, multiple things happened. We were able to give our community a chance to get in at the low, like really, really, like basically at the same price as investors got in. Like,
Yeah.
so that like created a lot of really good relationships. The folks that got in early were like the crazy ones, true believers.
Now they're rich, crazy ones.
Right. So, and they really got in because of the vision,
Yeah.
and that was like, that was really important. The second thing was that our competitors got really scared, and everybody delayed all their plans by like months. And in crypto, those months are like really, like I think in every startup, you should be thinking about like runway months, and like what am I shipping. If you delay something by 3 months, that is a huge
Yeah.
thing for like
It's years for every other company, right? Like
right.
this is, yeah.
Yeah, that is yeah. So that was my like biggest thing that I thought might allow us to outpace everybody, is that we would just be ahead of everyone. And if we're the only game in town, we just have more opportunity to get devs to look at this, more adoption. I didn't, that was like, I think the catalyst that really got us here, because that's when I started talking to Sam from FTX, those early conversations with our like biggest partners, and sold them on the vision. And their question was, is it live? Does it work? I'm like, yeah, look, it's live. We're live. Everything's done. You can go use it today.
I would
And
have
they're like,
loved to have been a
great,
fly on the wall in that conversation.
great,
Yeah.
let's go. So that was again, like that was, a forced decision, because we didn't have the option. We never had a ton of runway. We were always hungry to just get our product out and start getting traction. And if I don't know how to have that discipline, like as a founder. You obviously want to raise as much capital to give you as many opportunities as you can, but you really, really need to be extremely disciplined and pretend you only have 12 months. Whatever it is that you want to do, just really like focus and accomplish it. And what that capital provides you is, if maybe the market crashes, or maybe you're wrong about like be it product market fit, that gives you a chance to change your strategy. And again, that 12 months, like grind it, like only like try to make it work in that short amount of time.
Yeah, yeah. So much wisdom in this, sort of moving very quickly, but at the same time having a long enough focal length that you can weather those near-term ups and downs, right?
Yeah.
And that dynamic tension there. Tully, I know we're past our 45 minutes. I am super duper grateful for you taking time. I know you literally work 24/7, because I see your tweets nearly 24/7, and all the great work you guys are doing. On behalf of just everyone on our team, thank you for taking the time to share this with our audience here. Thank you. And maybe with that, I'll just very quickly wrap it up. So that was the end, our ski jump ending to 2 days. And I want to thank our 52 speakers more than 1,100 attendees over the last 2 days. These were, goodness, they were engineers, executives, MBA students, founders, future business leaders, entrepreneurial dreamers of all shapes and sizes. I think they were coming from 33 countries and every level of the enterprise stack. So from myself and on behalf of the rest of the enterprise team here at Foundation, that's Ashu, Joanne, Sid, Purva, Jenny, our newest addition. Thank you all for joining us for FC Build 2021. Happy holidays, guys, and we'll see you next year. And thank you again, Toli. That was absolutely awesome.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right, take care, guys. Bye for now.